Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with Nic Marks. Let's get to the interview. One of the reasons that I produce this series is because I made a conscious choice to focus on small and medium enterprise. Because first of all, I felt that they had the greatest potential to change. They had the greatest potential to disrupt. That the founders or the leaders of the businesses were much closer to the sense of purpose of what drove their businesses. To be honest with you, I've given up on large companies because everything that they write on the wall, in most cases, I just don't see it executed. And they can say what they want, but I just don't see it. And in fact, I work with a lot with universities. My main sponsor of this program is a university. I work with a lot with students. And I can tell you my advice to them is go to a small company for this reason. Like, it's amazing to me to sit in front of students and to see them, with all of their idealism and their excitement and their passions, and to think, okay, now you're being interviewed by AI to be considered for a face-to-face interview. They're not even being interviewed nowadays in these large companies by real people. And I recently said to them, that tells you everything you want to know about the culture. Is that what you want your life to be about?
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you, yeah.
So I was going to say, I'm really curious to know, like you said at the outset before we started the camera, that you've got grown-up kids.
Yeah.
Like, as somebody that sees this data every freaking week, what do you say to them about where they should put their time and attention into building a career?
So I have 3 kids, aged 22 to 27. I have 1 doctor, so I mean he's in his own track. I've got my middle one is the sort of romantic scientist, and he seems to be working half-time and writing teen fiction the other half, which I thoroughly approve of. He's got poems and things published, but not much more yet. The youngest is training to be an accountant, and so he is in one of the large accountancy firms now. So he's going down that large track. I think I've talked to him quite a bit about this, that it's a great foundation to get accountancy. It's law, accountancy is a great foundation, and to build your network when you've got that energy, 22 to 28, you can work longer hours. You can, I said to him, keep a book of everybody you meet, because these people in 10 years' time might be the people you want to know, and really try and build your network. And actually, he's very social, so hopefully do that. But I don't know what he'd do, but I mean, I don't suppose that he will stay in that culture. I mean, I worked at Accenture, and it wasn't called Accenture when I worked there. It was called Anderson Consulting, but it became Accenture. But it's my first job, and I only lasted 3 or 4 years, and I found it too big. So, but it's a good foundation too. So there's different things in there, isn't there?
Yeah, and to be fair, I don't advocate for that entrepreneurship is right for everybody. And what I suppose I'm suggesting is that I think, it's interesting when you work with students. Of course, they face a lot of pressure by their parents, that this is a step they must take, and they must take the step because it's about getting a job. And particularly over here, kids are coming out of university and they've got huge debts, and so that pressure, the social pressure to be seen to have, to spend 4 years in an undergrad, that it's paid off by a job in a company that people recognize, I mean, is huge. But I suppose, I'm really, I'm working on this idea around examining the first 5 years of someone's career. And I'm not expecting you necessarily to have an answer for this, but I'm curious, like I'm exploring how foundational that is to someone's future success and happiness. I'm really curious about that, and I wonder if that's something you've ever kind of analyzed.
Well, I certainly thought about it when I was that age. So a family friend was a guy called Charles Handy. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's quite a big management thinker in the UK. He was head of the London Business School. He's written about 10, 12 books. And I remember going to ask him for advice in my early 20s. And he said to me, well, Nick, unless you're a sports person, most men don't really achieve much till their 40s. So my advice would be to try different things, because how can you know at 22 what you want to do? And that was quite liberating advice. So yes, I was a statistician, and then I went into Anderson Consulting, learned some coding. But actually then I trained as a therapist, which is quite left field. My mother was a therapist, and I trained as a therapist on my weekends. And I was a little lost as a young man. I didn't, obviously I used to wear my hair long, and I didn't really know how to be a man because I felt the world was slightly misogynist, and I wasn't really wanting to sign up to that. So I did lots of men's group and experiential stuff and quite hippie-ish stuff. And I think in the end, that's why I become a statistician that starts measuring happiness, because I'm into that sort of feeling world too. So I think the best thing to do is to explore different things. And I think instinctively you see quite a lot of young doing that. You see them taking more, I don't know whether they do this in the States, they do quite a lot of traveling in the UK, and might take 6 months off after university and doing that. Maybe there's less pressure on the finances, I don't know. But they also, house prices are so high in the UK that they sort of feel that's unattainable. So they might just go and live life instead. So there's quite a lot of experimentation going on. I think that would be very healthy, because I think they'll learn new things, and then clearly they'll need to earn a living, or they do earn a living, and they'll find their way of living. And maybe they'll find out what's more important to them that way. I don't know.
What you've just advocated, I completely agree with. It's almost exactly the same advice I give to people. Basically, it's a long road. It's a marathon. To a bit of a cliche, but the fact is that exactly right. You're unformed. The university isn't forming you. The university is opening you up to further development, and exploring the world around them is, I think, really important. Have you ever applied your methodology to students?
I have previously done some work with students and even people at school, measuring their experience, but not in the methodologies I use right now. So what's behind your question with that?
Well, I was thinking about the fact that, because I do work closely with these students, I'm thinking about how tumultuous their 4-year undergrad is, and how much they go through as they develop and learn. They find themselves for the first time in their life in a place where, they've got to make their own decisions, and maybe the first time they've ever left home, and then suddenly their shift focuses to, this has got to work because we're spending a lot of money on it. I got to think about work. There's so many dimensions to what they go through in that pace. I just wondered if you'd ever examined it from a student perspective.
No, I mean, I think the idea of college, university it's obviously some rite of passage. Some economists call it a commitment device, in the sense that you commit for that 4 years, and it's going to be hard, but you want the accomplishment at the end, and clearly there's something that colleges do which basically rations the limited supply of jobs. So if you come out with a degree, you're more likely to get one of the jobs you want than if you haven't had a degree. That's the bargain on the table. Now, whether that's true is a different matter. So the sadly past now, Tony Hsieh, did you know Tony Hsieh, who was head of Zappos? I knew him because he was quite into happiness. And I can't remember if this is in a conversation or I've read it, because I had lots of quite crazy conversations with Tony Hsieh about 8-10 years ago. But he said that, if a college degree costs $50,000, why don't you borrow $25,000 and set up a business? You'd learn a lot more, and you'd lose it, but you'd learn more losing it than you would from doing a degree. I mean, that was his advice. I mean, that's quite radical, but I've got people in my team who haven't got a degree,
right?
But they're just as smart and sometimes more applied. Certainly more applied, younger. So the youngest in my team, I don't actually know her age. I guess she's about 21, 22. But she's been working 4 years. She's not raw out of college. She's been in sales jobs. She's been this, she's been that. She's very practical. And that's good skills.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need a radical rethink of what we're telling kids that they should do. I mean, it's my observation. It's similar in the UK as it is here. But 50 years ago, we started gutting the trades.
Yeah.
And there's been studies that show that people in the trades have generally a higher happiness and less sense of satisfaction in their jobs than professions do. And now we can't find people to fix the stuff in our homes because we've been pushing kids into, things that were supposed to be more, certainly I think more status focused than real, happiness focus. My last questions for you really are about your own business, because I'm curious about, you're not an academic. You're doing this as a business person. If you can give us one example of a company that has taken the data that you gather and has changed their focus. Can you share an example?
Yeah, so we have quite a lot of sort of growing tech companies, let's say, certainly tech-enabled companies, and when you're growing, when you're small and growing, it's that passionate thing, and then you get over 50 people, 70 people, and you start having to introduce some systems and things like that, and so they really fear about losing their culture because of the stress that the growth is putting on. Some of them, we've had clients that have been 100 people when they sign their contract, and when they come and re-sign it, they're 220, 250, and they've doubled in size in a year. I mean, they've obviously got Series B, C funding or something. But I mean, that's a huge stress. So we definitely see them, and we fit very well with those sort of companies because a lot of them do retrospectives. They work in agile ways with their tech methodologies. We're effectively a retrospective, agile way of dealing with team culture. So we fit very well. And of course, they're also familiar with technology, and we basically are a software company in a way, in the sense that we deliver things through cloud-based software. So it's we find them. Some of them do it just in time, just before they lose their culture. Some have already got some of those big problems. If we start with a company at 400 people, it's always more difficult to get going. If we start with them when they're 100 and they grow to 400, it becomes part of their culture. And we find that what happens in those fast-growing companies is people get promoted quickly, and they suddenly become a team lead, probably with absolutely no training at all.
Right.
So you're relying on their instincts. So you have this huge variety in people's instinctive people leadership skills. You get some people just natural, and you get people that just aren't. They're great technically, but they get frustrated, they get whatever. And what we can help them do is have the right conversations at the right time by providing them the right data. So we really see ourselves as supporting team leaders to be the best team leader they can be. Rather than to be sort of highlighting how bad they are, we're trying to show them how they can be better. And I think that's a pretty critical thing. That's pretty much our focus, is really how do we help teams. We're very focused on the team because it's where people's experience of work is. It's very proximal, our experience of work. In a large organization, you clearly don't know what's going on in other divisions. But even in a smaller organization, it's the people, the 3 to 12 people that you sort of work with closely that are going to most impact your happiness, and you're going to most impact them. So you're looking at that resonant sort of group space, and you're trying to help that group communicate better and to understand each other better. And the data, just by, we can't make people happier at work, but we can build a feedback loop that helps people have better conversations, and that's what we do.
And I'm curious, I mean, gosh, the nature of this whole discussion must have radically changed as we now deal with remote workers. So I know it's probably a big question to ask, but how does a company go about prioritizing these kinds of issues, happiness, when we don't even work together the way we used to?
To be more intentional. And I think a lot of us instinctively did it, when COVID struck and we were suddenly remote. My team went from, we had an office, and not everybody went in every day, but we basically had an office 5 days a week, to not having an office. And I would check in, ask people how they were, and then I'd ask the second question, how are you really? Because how are you doesn't always work. And I think a lot of people instinctively did that. A lot of organizations did that quite instinctively, once they'd recovered from the first month, which is very hard. And we're really a system for systemizing that to make sure that happens all across the organization, that you can't, people talk about having one culture, but really the data shows there's microcultures. There's a huge variety across the organization.
Right.
So by systemizing it, you start trying to, level up, basically. We're not, raise up, actually. The ones that are already great, you don't have to do it. You're trying to raise these ones. So that's what we do. And actually for remote, it's even more important, having a system, because you can't see, you don't see if someone's got a problem. I imagine that quite a lot of people who didn't like their bosses loved working from home because they didn't have to see them. They could keep their head down, and I don't know, I don't have data on that, but I basically, I would imagine that quite a lot of people really liked getting out of the office dynamic and just getting on with their work. But of course, then what happens is over the whatever it is, nearly 2 years we've been going now, you start losing those relationships. You start not having those water cooler moments, not having those connections. So the variables that I see under pressure are about team relationships, are about friendships, are about collaboration. And we're going to have to recover from that over time. Yeah.
Do you know, the thing that I observed, and I thought it really had a bit of a profound effect on me, was that through the beginning of COVID, I found that working from home was the great equalizer, for the simple fact that, it's easy to show up to work and you're polished, shiny, you've got your suit on. It's very difficult when people are seeing your kids and seeing your dog barking in the background, and they're seeing where you live and how you live.
Yeah.
It felt like we all just came down a level in terms of the way we needed to understand one another. And I actually found it was quite a pleasant experience. I found people I was working with became a little softer and a little more understanding of everybody around them. That was my observation. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that sort of put on an armor to go to work, and that armor came off. Though I think it was also a struggle sometimes. So I remember talking to a friend, and he's got, I should think his daughter's 6 or 7, and he would come out of his office wherever he was working and into the kitchen, and she'd sort of think, who's this guy? He's not Fun Daddy. He seems to be some other person. Because he was in work mode. And I think that we do change personas somewhat. And in some ways, the commute allowed us to do that. We could change from office man to dad or mum or whatever it is. So I think there's some difficulties and some challenges from working from home as well about how you balance those things. Like work-life balance has actually been quite under pressure because people have lost the boundaries. And there was that clear boundary. I'm at home now. Like you talked about with your dad all those years ago. We still have some of that. And I think that going has been problematic as well.
God, it's so fascinating. I could talk to you about this all day, but I just want to say thank you so much. I think it is so, what you're dealing with, I think, is so central to all of life. I mean, we are being asked to give so much of ourselves to the work that we do today. And a big question as to whether we should be giving so much of ourselves, but it seems a lot of us are. So I just want to say thank you so much for the work you do and also for the insights you've shared today. I really appreciate it.
That's great. And if people want to, I've created a free tool for people to check their own happiness at work. It's called Friday1, and if they want to sort of understand a bit more about those drivers and the sort of data I've been talking to, that, some of the variables are in there that they can see in that. And it gives you a sort of bit like one of those 16 personality tests that give you that feedback report so you can reflect on your own happiness at work.
Well, I will include that link in the video. So thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for sticking to the end of our 2-part interview with Nic Marks, founder of Friday Pulse. I hope you were as interested as I was in learning about the need for us to expect greater happiness in our lives from the companies we work with and lead. I want to give a big shout out to my amazing sponsor, the Innovation Hub at Carleton University, dedicated to helping create leaders and new business ventures. Find out more at www.carleton.ca/innovationhub, and please remember to hit like and subscribe for more great stories of inspired entrepreneurs. See you next time.